So you are planning a move to France, or you are thinking about planning a move to France, and you got to get your head right, you got to get organized, and you got to get it together to make it all happen. Well, this video is brought to you by someone who did exactly that. And these are all the tips that I wish I had had back then that would have made my move and my transition so much easier. Before we get into the video, let me just say this. If you have any questions about what I'm talking about, just put them in the comments. But keep in mind that I'm not an expert in visas or immigration law or any of that sort of stuff. I'm just an immigrant myself who's been through this process at the age of 55. This video is for people who are planning on staying in France for longer than 90 days. And it's mainly for Americans who are planning to stay in France over the long term because I'm American and that's been my experience. Tip number one, if you're moving to France or thinking about a move to France, is to explore your visa options. First of all, if you are going to be a student or if you're going to be taking a job with a French company, you can rely on those organizations, your school or your employer, to help you through the process. They've generally been through it before and they can help you with all the documents you're going to need and how to go through the application process, and they'll support you with any documentation you may need from them. Looking at everyone else, if you're someone who is planning to come here on retirement, if you're someone who just wants to live in France for a year but not work, if you're someone who wants to move here long term and be an entrepreneur, I suggest you go onto the France Visa website. I'm going to put the link into the description for you. You can click over there and they have a cool tool that's called the Visa Wizard. You can fill in this Visa Wizard. You tell it about yourself, who you are, what you plan on doing, how long you're going to stay, and it will tell you what documents are going to be required. And then you can go online and fill out your application process. And for the US, there are multiple centers, processing centers across the US, because France has a third party, which is called VFS, that actually processes the visas in the US. And you can find a center that is hopefully not too far away from where you are. And that's where you'll end up having your interview for the application process. I just want to say, when you do the Visa Wizard, make sure that you're honest about what your plans are for working in France, because France is very serious about work permission. There are differences in everything in terms of like what you can do while you're here, what you can't do, even if you're thinking of yourself as a remote worker or whatever. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. So tip number two is really, once you've decided to move to France, you need to get your documents together. And what do I mean by documents? Well, it will depend on the type of visa that you're going to get and also what you want to do when you are in France. For example, you may need a birth certificate. You definitely will need your passport. You got to make sure that you have at least 2 blank pages in your passport, and you have to make sure that your passport has at least 2 years left on it. If it's getting down there, I would almost suggest just renewing it now, because if you plan to live in France for a few years at least, it's much more convenient than having to deal with these long distance passport renewals and stuff like that. You can do it. I would suggest making sure you have everything up to date. Your driver's license. Unlike in the States, you can't use your American driving license as any kind of an ID here. Just doesn't work like that. But 2 things. Number one, if you plan to drive using your American driver's license, you can do that for the first year that you live in France, but you have to have, by law, you have to have a translation into French of your American driving license. It has to be a traducteur agréé, or sometimes they say a traducteur assermenté. And these are the state-sanctioned translators, so you can't just go online and hire your French friend to translate it for you. It has to be like an official stamped document. And you got to carry that around with you with your driving license in the event that you do get stopped. Now, just a quick note on the French driving license. This is a little aside, but I have a whole series on what it was like for me getting my French driving license. It was a lot more than I ever thought it would be. France has a relationship with certain states in the US where you can exchange your driving license without going through any of the process of like taking the driving tests here, the written test or the practical test. But there are also a whole series of states such as New York and California and a bunch of others that do not have that agreement with France. And so you cannot exchange your license and you have to go through the whole thing. So if that's interesting to you, check it out. You may find it very helpful to kind of have some tips on that going into the process. Other documents you may need. You may have to provide a bank statement showing that you have savings enough to support yourself for the time that your visa will last in France. And that's because if you, it could be a variety of different reasons. If you are on a visitor visa and you're not going to be working, or even if you are a freelancer or a remote worker, if you plan to work, you've got to be able to prove that you have the economic means to support yourself at least the minimum wage level in France. That number does change. Right now, I know it's under 20,000 euros, but you should look that up online to make sure that you understand what that is, if that's going to apply to you. Okay, so you also may be required to, depending on your situation. When I was getting married in France, I had to provide my proof of residence in the US. Not sure why, but I had to have those documents translated. You just want to make sure that you have pretty much every major document that you think you might need. And you want to have the original and also copies of it. And then tip 3 is a lot of these documents will need to be translated. Any documents that need to be translated for official purposes in France will have to be translated by that traducteur assermenté or traducteur agréé. And you can find lists of them online. If you need a translator, I love the one who has done all my translating work, so let me know and I can give you their name. Tip number 4, if you are going to be moving to France. If you are a self-employed person, a freelancer, a digital nomad, an entrepreneur, a micro-entrepreneur, someone who works for yourself, you've got your own gig going, I strongly, strongly recommend that you speak to an accountant, a French expert accountant. It's called an expert comptable in French, and these are people who are certified by the state. If you have a business, you actually have to have an expert comptable in France, but you should just make sure that you speak to someone and that you understand the tax implications of moving to France and what the implications are of owning your own business, especially if you plan to have employees, but even if you don't, because France is very different from the US in terms of taxes and social charges, just the way that it happens. The timelines are different. The dates of declaration are different, and the rules are different, including the rules of what makes you a tax resident in France, and including the rules of who pays your social charges, which is your healthcare, your retirement, all that kind of stuff. So just make sure you talk to someone and that you feel like you know what's going on. As a serial entrepreneur who has owned 4 companies, I really wish I had done this more extensively before getting to France, because I had a few big surprises that cost me some money and didn't make me happy. So I hope that this helps you. Tip number 5, prepare yourself mentally for this whole experience. I've been already telling you a lot of things. There's a lot more things that you're going to go through and that you're going to have to organize and you're going to have to deal with, both administratively and emotionally, and even physically too. It can be very tiring to deal with these things. So I just wanted to make sure that I pointed that out, that you take some time to breathe deeply and to repeat to yourself that everything is going to be okay. You're going to go one step at a time. And even if you come up against an obstacle, a little one or a big one, you're going to get through it. You got this. Tu peux le faire. Je crois en toi. So just keep going, but make sure that you've allowed that space mentally to know that, you will come up against some difficulties and you're going to get through them. And it's okay. It's part of the process. Tip number 6 is to join some online groups. Why do I say this? Well, for one, there are so many supportive people who are either thinking about the process or going through the process or have gone through the process of moving to France and all that entails. And they are online in groups and they're willing to help you. They're amazing. It can be a very supportive community, and I really suggest that you seek out some like-minded people who may have gone through some of the experiences that you're going through. I'll put some of my favorites in the descriptions. Probably my all-time favorite is Americans Driving in France, because for me personally, they were such a source of support and encouragement at a time that was strangely difficult and unanticipated for me. There are legal groups that will help you answer questions about immigration and apartment, real estate, things like that. There are groups for women who live in Paris or who live in France, who are expat in the country, and those are great for community, for asking for recommendations for finding a job, for where to get your hair done, stuff like that. So I found them all very helpful, and like I said, I'll put a few in the description. Number 7, I'm looking at number 7. I'm tempted to say I should have moved it up higher, but hopefully you're already thinking about this. I just need to say it. You've got to get your French language up and running. If you already speak a little bit of French, that's great. I would say if it's like a school French that you've got under your belt so far, that's a great start. But if you're truly planning a move to France for any long-term period, it's really going to help you with your whole experience in France if you can speak French in your daily life. You don't have to be fluent. You just have to be willing to communicate, and you've got to be able to like get your point across for simple things. It will really change your experience. And so I would suggest that in addition to apps, I really like to follow Instagram accounts that I love because there are a lot of great French teachers out there doing short lessons, really cute snippets or sample dialogues of like when you go into a store and you want to buy some shoes, but you don't know how to say like, do you have my size? Or do you think these look good on me, or stuff like that. So there's a lot, especially on Instagram right now, that I think you could find very helpful. But I also really think if you have the resources, if you can do it, it can be really great to get yourself a French tutor. Wherever you find them, you can find them online. There's like Super Prof. There's all kinds of websites where you can find someone. I found my current French professor, who I adore, on Instagram. He was making Instagram videos, and I just reached out to him and said, hey, do you have room for another student? And he did, and he has transformed my French experience here, even though I already had my diploma in French. I really recommend that because what you want is to be able to talk to someone and tell them, I want you to teach me how to talk in my daily life. Like, honestly, aside from the basics, like skip the grammar, skip the memorization of the subjunctive, blah, blah, blah. Just learn how to, go into a store, learn how you start a conversation, which is, by the way, always with bonjour, and how you can ask for the basic things you need, how you can indicate that you want to pay with your credit card, or how you can indicate that you want to pay in cash. These basic things that in life will just, how do you order a baguette? You gotta know how to do that. At the bakery, and you don't want to wait until you're in that situation and be like, I know a lot of people who move to France will be moving outside the Parisian area, and people think in Paris, well, everyone speaks English. To a certain extent, I think you can get by speaking English in France. I mean, depending on what you want to do for your job. But I'm telling you, just believe me, your experience will be completely different if you put a little bit of effort in. You get so much respect and extra kindness from the French, who absolutely adore their own language for good reason, and they appreciate how difficult it is to learn French, and they will kind of give you a little extra help. There are meetups online where French people want to speak English and English people want to speak French, and you can help each other, where you take turns. I can't stress that enough. If you're moving to France, you should try to at least get a basic level of French. Okay, and then my 8th tip. This is something that I really strongly counsel you to do, which is, when you're ready to move to France and you are getting everything together, I suggest that you sell, store, or give away almost everything you have. If you're moving and an employer is covering your relocation costs and you want to fill up an ocean-going container with your couch and your coffee table, you do you. I'm not going to judge on whether or not that's écolo, but transporting things across the ocean, which is the way you're going to do it if you have anything substantial that you want to transport, a bed, mirrors, artwork, things like that. You can encounter taxes, like customs duties on things that you import into France, and that can be very complicated to know what, if anything, you're going to have to pay and on which items, and do you have proof of the receipt of the couch that you bought 10 years ago. I don't know. You can take extra suitcases on your flight to France when you're moving, but remember, you're going to pay extra for that too. And beyond like one extra suitcase, it can get pretty expensive. For me, I brought my little meditation chair. That was the one thing I really wanted to have with me. And then, of course, I brought a few pieces of artwork that were important to me. I brought my notebooks. I brought my books, but not all of them. I brought my clothes, but not all of them. I sold some very nice handbags. Just get rid of it. France is a wonderful capital of design. You can find things here. You can buy things online. There's a great resource that I will put into the description called Le Bon Coin here, where people are selling things all the time. And you can find furniture, on Facebook Marketplace, for example, and you can furnish your own place here. So I just say sell it, give it away. Just to put a finer point on it, I waited 12 weeks for my shipment to come over the ocean, and I paid about $3,500 to ship what was 18 pieces, and those 18 pieces were mainly just, you know, regular size boxes with like clothes or shoes or whatever in them, and books, and one with my meditation chair, which is pretty small in it. So it's expensive and it takes a lot of time, and trust me, you'll be feeling free and ready to feather your nest anew when you get to France. I think that's it for now. I just want to say, if you have a question, you can put it in the comments. Just remember, as I said, I'm not an expert in all of these legal matters, so I'll do my best to answer you or point you in the right direction, and you can do more research on your own specific case because everyone has their own details. Some people like it when I speak a little bit of French because I'm always talking about the fact that I do speak French. So I will just end this by saying that si tu vas déménager en France, wow, félicitations, parce que pour moi, franchement, je me pince tout le temps. Même maintenant, après presque 2 ans, ça fait presque 2 ans, wow, que je suis là en France, à Paris. J'adore la France, j'adore les Français, j'adore parler français. Et du coup, bon courage, bonne continuation. Et à bientôt les amis. Okay, see you soon.